Hi, everyone, and welcome to our Conference of Consulting Actuaries Leadership Development interview series. My name is Michael Clark. I'm the host of the podcast, managing director at Agilis based in Denver, Colorado. My guest on today's podcast is Melissa Chacko. Melissa is the Deputy Chief Actuary at the New York City Office of the Actuary. Her career has spanned positions in international consulting, health, as well as retirement. A couple of other interesting tidbits about Melissa. So Melissa and I actually got to know each other when we were both board members with the CCA. She's originally from Montreal, Canada. And in case you're really curious, her Myers-Briggs type is an INFJ, which, funny enough, is something that Melissa and I talk about at length, both because we're both interested in it. Our two personality types tend to be the least compatible when you look at Myers-Briggs type, which is also funny because it's also the personality type of my wife, and yet somehow we still manage to make it work. So I love talking to Melissa. We always have a good time. So Melissa, welcome to the Leadership Development Podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Melissa, I mentioned a little bit about your background, that you've had positions covering a lot of different areas of consulting work, international, health, retirement. I think people would find it interesting to get your take on your career path.
So I started my career in global consulting. I graduated and then I just needed a job. So this was the job that I got, and I didn't know what it was. I just kind of tried my best. I failed many times. Um, I really didn't understand a lot of the concepts and things like this, but I just continued to try, and then one day it all kind of clicked. I think it was during a special calculation, like a settlement or something like this, where we had to roll forward liabilities. And then I was like, oh, that's how liabilities move. So it was like very interesting to me that, kind of clicked at one point. So I did global consulting for about 8 years. And then at that time, I was doing my FSA in US retirement. So I had to do EA exams. And luckily, when I was at Buck, I was given opportunities to work in US retirement. So I worked with single employer and also multi-employer pension plans. And like I said, it was because I wanted some experience and, wanted the chance to apply what I learned into the actual work that we do. And then, at one point I decided that, maybe it was like time to change again. And I started in the health group. And then with the health group is where I joined the NICOA team. And I worked as a health consultant on that team for about 5 years, and which is how I met the great OA folks. And then finally I was recruited. So I've been at the OA for about 2 years now as the deputy chief.
So you went from international consulting to retirement consulting to health consulting, back to retirement consulting, but kind of in an in-house position with the Office of the Actuary.
Right. And actually, I do work on retiree medical here. So I'm one of the signing actuaries, which
Oh,
is
so
kind of interesting. I'm on
you
the other
get
side.
you get to you get to do a little bit of it of everything with your role there at the
Yeah.
Office of the Actuary.
Mhm.
I want to go back to something you said when you were talking about your first foray into international consulting, and you said that you failed a bunch. What do you mean that you failed? Like, how does somebody fail at international consulting?
Well, I think that, when I graduated, I was very much just like a student. I feel like I'm still a student. And we can like even talk about that a bit later on. But, in terms of failing, I felt like I I wasn't as doing as well as I had expected. So maybe it was like a failure on my end. I wasn't understanding concepts. Like, what does a local actuary mean? No one ever told me what that means. It just means like an actuary locally wherever they are. Like we could be local actuaries to someone in Switzerland. They're locally placed. Like I didn't understand the concept. And, but eventually, because there was so many moving pieces, it all kind of came together. But yeah, I had to fail. Like drafting emails was so impossible for me, and communicating, I couldn't even follow what was happening sometimes. But I guess with persistence, it just kind of came together.
How has that influenced the rest of your career? I mean, that's a really interesting takeaway, because I think we all experience that to some level when we start out in the profession, is that there's a lot of things that we're like, I have no idea what people are talking about. Um, how has that changed the way that maybe you work with more junior colleagues?
So I feel like it's changed the way that I work with myself and with others. So with myself, I kind of give myself a bit of a grace period and also some understanding that it's not always so direct and obvious. It kind of takes a bit of thinking and studying to really grasp a concept. So, and what I kind of try to do with the folks that I work with is something that I didn't always get. Sometimes I did, luckily, but I didn't always get the type of situation where you sit down with someone and they show you how a calculation works, what it all means. I kind of had to learn it on my own at times. Sometimes, people did sit down with me and talk me through things, but a lot of it was self-study. But I think that self-study is so important because it's that, for me, in my view, that's how you really hold on to a concept and fully understand it in your own terms. And that's how you can then communicate it and share it with other people. So that's what I kind of do with the new folks. We just had some new hires start here, and I prepared an introduction. This is the thing that we do, and I know it's a lot of information at the beginning, but it'll all come together eventually. So it was a lot of encouragement and trying to inspire them that it's a lot right now, and that's completely understandable, and you will get it eventually.
So
So it's
it's
a kind of like a cross between hand holding and also giving them the independence to learn a little bit, because for me it was basically like sink or swim. And I was like, I'm
uh-huh.
not going to sink.
But that's
Luckily
good
I
though. So
didn't.
so you give them some guiding principles and some maybe
Mhm.
overarching view, but then there's still room for them to figure things out on their own.
That's right. And I do tell them that too. I say, did you try to figure it out? You know, and sometimes they'll come to me straight, without trying. And I just kind of say, okay, go back and try again. Just try again. And now I'm seeing some people that had just joined in January, finding my mistakes, and I'm so proud of them. So yeah.
That's awesome. Let's talk for a couple of minutes about just the switching practice areas, because you've done that now a couple of times. Why did you end up switching practice areas in the first place, um, and what have you learned from that process?
Right. So I had been doing global consulting for 8 years. And so I was, like I was saying, I was failing at the beginning, but eventually it all kind of came together. And I think after that amount of time, I'd mastered a lot of the concepts and it became kind of repetitive. And also at that time, it was hard for me to connect with people, because in my group specifically, because we were kind of dispersed all over the US. There was just one other person in the New York office, and coming to work was not so much fun because it was just straight work, and then you go home. So, and I found myself making friends with people in US retirement and the OPEB group and things like that. So, and then I also heard that there was a need in the OPEB group. So it was kind of, it kind of just presented itself as an opportunity for me to join that group. But I still met with one of the leads there. His name was Pete Ford, who became my manager. And I just knocked on his door, and I sold myself. I had to tell him, I'm a fast learner. I will work really hard. Look at my track record. I really had to sell myself, even though it was internal and it was so informal, but I still took it very seriously. So then I joined the OPEP group, and my peers were my age. We would joke around. We would work really hard. We'd be able to ask each other questions or help each other. And I just really liked that environment. So environment is very important for me. And then, you know, the fact that I left Buck to come to the Office of the Actuary, I also felt like it was the right transition and the time to move on, um, because a lot of what I do goes back to actuarial principles, and I really enjoy that. And I didn't get as much of that when I was at Buck towards the end.
Interesting. Did
So
you
that's why I changed.
when you were switching, going from international to retirement, healthcare, now back to retirement, did you find it limiting it all, making those changes, or did you have to take a step back? I mean, we normally, you gain all this knowledge, you kind of progress in your roles and responsibilities in a team, but part of that's based on the subject matter knowledge that you gather along the way. So going from one practice area to another, did you end up having to take a step back at all, and how did you deal with that?
So, I stayed within the realm of um, like pension type of thing. So a lot of the concepts, like the fundamental valuing a liability, is very similar. So, there's definitely specifics to OPEB that are different from multi-employer, from US retirement, and global actuarial stuff. But I think because I worked so hard at getting the fundamental stuff down, adding to that plate wasn't so difficult. I mean, it was difficult in the sense of, learning the specifics and the details of things, and kind of keeping it in my head and retaining it was a challenge, but I felt like I had a head start because of the experiences that I gained in US retirement and global.
To me, it seems very daunting, and I've had other friends and colleagues that have switched practice areas after they've had years of experience in one area, and I mean, my hat's off to people that can do that. It scares me to death
Yeah.
to think about doing that, but I mean, it sounds like you wouldn't have a problem recommending that somebody consider that if it was a route that they felt like they wanted to pursue.
Yeah, I think that, it's important to try different things. Inertia is very strong, I like to challenge myself. But, a lot of times when I made moves, it wasn't really premeditated. Like, it kind of just happened. And then it was like later on, kind of like, what did I just do? And so it wasn't so easy. I'm making it seem like it was super easy, but like, I still struggled. I had to put in a lot of hours to seem like I knew what I was talking about, because I wanted to come off as someone who knew what they were talking about. So I really worked at it. And, I was talking about how when I graduated, I was still a student working, and I still feel like a student, because when I came to the Office of the Actuary, I had to learn all the New York City pension plans. And, there are a lot of pension plans, and I'm still learning every day. And I meet people that have been here for 25 years and they're still learning. So, that's kind of just what I do. I just try to learn as best as I can.
So that was something that you and I talked about a lot preparing for this podcast. And that experience that you gained from switching practice areas really brought that kind of passion for learning out. How do you make time to learn? I mean, because we're not talking about like having to learn like a small thing. I mean, you mentioned even at the Office of the Actuary, you're still having to learn all the intricacies of all these different plans that you work on. How do you make the time for that?
I don't really know. Maybe it's because I kind of set out a plan, and then I slowly go through that plan and adjust as needed. I really think that towards the end of my studying days, I really felt like I mastered how to study. And so I just kind of continued on using that type of model in all the different things that I did. So really going back to basics is the first thing that I did, finding similarities, finding patterns, looking at multiple reports, comparing them, writing my notes and studying my own notes. That's kind of what I would do. I was really like a student. I still feel like a student. And I think that's kind of like a good thing to feel.
I think it's a great quality and character trait, right? To be that perpetual student. And I'm sure that's
Mhm.
something that you pride yourself on. I mean, I've definitely seen it with the work that we've been involved with together through the CCA. So no,
Mhm.
all that's great and fascinating. I appreciate you sharing that with us.